What you are about to hear is a story that will curdle your blood and leave you questioning the darkness that can reside in the human heart. It's a tale of love, betrayal, and a culinary act so vile, it defies imagination. Before we delve into this chilling account, I urge you to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell. You won't want to miss the shocking conclusion to this and other tales of true horror. Now, settle in and prepare to be disturbed. The first time Kenji met Akari, it was under the soft, ethereal glow of 1,000 paper lanterns. The Obon festival was in full swing, a vibrant tapestry of color, music, and the sweet, cloying scent of cotton candy and grilled squid. Akari, with her hair adorned with a single, delicate gardenia, moved through the throng with a grace that seemed to defy the chaos around her. She was a splash of serenity in a sea of joyful noise. Kenji, a struggling artist with more dreams than yen, found himself utterly captivated. He sketched her from a distance, his charcoal pencil flying across the page, trying to capture the gentle curve of her smile, the way the lantern light danced in her dark, expressive eyes. Their courtship was a whirlwind of stolen moments and shared dreams. They would spend hours in Kenji's small, cluttered apartment, the air thick with the smell of oil paints and turpentine. He would paint her, endlessly, each canvas a testament to his growing adoration. Akari, a culinary student with a passion for traditional Japanese cuisine, would fill his tiny kitchen with the most exquisite aromas. She believed in the power of food to soothe the soul, to forge connections, to express love where words fell short. Her creations were not just meals. They were edible art, each dish a symphony of flavors and textures, meticulously crafted. They married a year later, in a small, intimate ceremony at a local shrine. The early days of their marriage were idyllic, a continuation of their gentle courtship. Kenji's art began to gain some recognition, a small gallery in Kyoto agreeing to exhibit his work. Akari, having graduated with top honors, took a position as a junior chef at a renowned kaiseki restaurant. They were a team, supporting each other's ambitions, their love a warm, comforting hearth in the often cold world. But as the years began to bleed into one another, subtle cracks began to appear in their carefully constructed paradise. Kenji's initial success plateaued. The art world, once so promising, proved to be a fickle mistress. His paintings, once filled with the vibrant hues of his love for Akari, began to take on a darker, more somber tone. His frustration festered, a slow-burning ember that he often tried to extinguish with sake. He became withdrawn, prone to fits of melancholy and flashes of irrational anger. Akari, ever the optimist, tried to be his anchor. She would prepare his favorite meals, the comforting broths and perfectly seasoned rice dishes of his childhood, hoping to coax him out of his shell. But her culinary offerings, once a source of shared joy, now seemed to be a reminder of his own perceived failures. He would often push her food away, his words laced with a bitterness that stung more than any physical blow. "Is this all you think I'm good for?" he would sneer. "To be fed like a child while you go out and conquer the world?" Her success became a point of contention. While Kenji's career stagnated, Akari's flourished. She was promoted to sous chef, her innovative take on traditional dishes earning her rave reviews from critics and patrons alike. She was featured in magazines, her name whispered with reverence in the culinary circles of Kyoto. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple, the talented artist and his brilliant chef wife. But behind the closed doors of their increasingly silent home, a different, more sinister picture was emerging. The arguments became more frequent, more venomous. Kenji's jealousy, a poisonous vine, began to wrap itself around the foundations of their marriage, choking the life out of it. He accused her of looking down on him, of flaunting her success to highlight his own inadequacies. He would belittle her passion, calling her a glorified cook, her art form a lowly trade compared to his own. Akari, who had always seen their passions as two sides of the same creative coin, was heartbroken by his cruelty. One particularly cold autumn evening, Akari came home, her face flushed with excitement. She had just been offered the head chef position at a new, upscale restaurant in Tokyo. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to truly make a name for herself. She found Kenji in his studio, surrounded by a sea of canvases, all bearing the same dark, twisted visages. He was drunk, the sharp, acrid smell of sake hanging heavy in the air. She told him her news, her voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. For a moment, a flicker of the old Kenji seemed to surface. He looked at her, his eyes clearing for a brief second, and a ghost of a smile touched his lips. But then, the darkness returned, his expression hardening into a familiar mask of resentment. "Tokyo?" he spat, the word dripping with disdain. "You would leave me here to rot while you go and play the big shot in the city?" "No, Kenji," she pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. "We would go together. You could find a new gallery, a fresh start." He laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed in the silent room. "A fresh start? You mean, I can be your kept man, the artist husband of the famous chef Akari? Is that what you want? To parade me around like one of your fancy dishes?" The argument escalated, their voices rising to a fever pitch. Kenji, in a drunken rage, grabbed one of his canvases and hurled it across the room. It struck the wall with a sickening thud, the frame splintering, the dark, tormented face on the canvas now permanently scarred. Akari flinched, a small, involuntary gasp escaping her lips. That night, for the first time, she was afraid of him. The man she had fallen in love with, the gentle artist who had sketched her under the lantern light, was gone. In his place was a stranger, a man consumed by a bitterness so profound, it had twisted him into something unrecognizable. The following weeks were a tense, unspoken truce. Akari delayed her decision about the Tokyo offer, hoping that Kenji would come to his senses. She walked on eggshells around him, carefully choosing her words, desperate to avoid another explosive confrontation. But the silence was just as suffocating as the shouting. The air in their home was thick with unspoken resentments, a palpable tension that clung to the walls like a damp chill. The final, fatal argument began, as so many had before, over something trivial. A misplaced set of keys, a forgotten promise to pick up groceries. But this time, the tinderbox of their marriage was so dry, it only took a single spark to ignite a raging inferno. The accusations flew, each one more hurtful than the last. Kenji's drunken slurs became more personal, more venomous. He brought up old wounds, past insecurities, twisting them into weapons to wield against her. In a moment of desperation, Akari threw his own words back at him. "You're just jealous, Kenji. You can't stand that I'm successful while you're wallowing in your own self-pity." The words had barely left her lips when she saw the shift in his eyes. The drunken haze was replaced by a cold, reptilian focus. He moved towards her, his steps slow, deliberate. She backed away, a primal fear seizing her. She had seen him angry before, but this was different. This was a chilling, calculated rage. He cornered her in the kitchen, the place that had once been her sanctuary, her creative haven. The gleaming knives on the magnetic strip on the wall seemed to mock her, their sharp edges glinting ominously in the dim light. He grabbed her by the shoulders, his grip like iron. "You think you're better than me?" he hissed, his face inches from hers. "You think your little food creations make you an artist?" Tears streamed down her face, a silent plea for him to stop, to see the woman he had once loved. But he was beyond reason, lost in the labyrinth of his own bitterness. He shook her, her head snapping back and forth. The world around her began to blur, the familiar objects of her kitchen morphing into a dizzying vortex of shapes and colors. Her last coherent thought was of the Obon festival, of the soft glow of the paper lanterns, of the gentle artist who had stolen her heart with a charcoal sketch. It was a lifetime ago, a different world, a different man. The man standing before her now was a monster, a creature born of envy and despair. And as his hands moved from her shoulders to her throat, she knew, with a terrifying certainty, that her beautiful, vibrant life was about to be extinguished. The culinary artist, the woman who had brought so much joy to others through her food, was about to become the final, horrific ingredient in her husband's masterpiece of hate. The scent of simmering rage filled the kitchen, a grotesque parody of the delightful aromas that had once defined her existence. The first chapter of their love story had ended. The final, bloody chapter was about to begin. The simmering pot on the stove, a forgotten remnant of a meal she had planned to cook for him, now seemed to be a harbinger of the unspeakable horror that was to come. It was a hot pot, a dish meant to be shared, to bring people together. In Kenji's twisted mind, a new, macabre recipe was beginning to form. The world narrowed to the circle of Kenji's hands around Akari's throat. The pressure was immense, a crushing weight that stole the air from her lungs and sent sparks of color dancing behind her eyelids. Her hands, once so deft and nimble in the kitchen, scrabbled uselessly at his wrists, her nails scraping against his skin. A desperate, gurgling sound escaped her lips, a sound that was barely human. In his eyes, she saw not a flicker of hesitation, not a glimmer of the man she had married. There was only a cold, chilling emptiness, a void where love and reason had once resided. Her struggles grew weaker, her vision tunneling into a pinpoint of darkness. The last thing she saw was the faint, shimmering reflection of the kitchen light on the blade of a Santoka knife, one of her favorites, hanging on the magnetic strip just behind him. Then, nothing. The silence that descended upon the small house was absolute, broken only by Kenji's ragged, heaving breaths. He stared down at Akari's lifeless body, slumped at his feet like a discarded doll. Her eyes, once so full of life and love, were now wide and vacant, staring up at the ceiling with a look of surprised betrayal. A strange sense of calm washed over him, a detached clarity that seemed to push the drunken haze from his mind. He had done it. He had finally silenced the voice that had become a constant, nagging reminder of his own failures. For a long moment he stood frozen, the enormity of his actions slowly seeping into his consciousness. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prick at the edges of his newfound calm. He had to do something. He couldn't just leave her here. The thought of the police, of sirens and flashing lights, of a lifetime spent in a cold, sterile prison cell, sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He had to make her disappear. His gaze fell upon the simmering pot of dashi on the stove, the one Akari had been preparing for their dinner. A hot pot. The irony was not lost on him. A bitter, twisted smile touching his lips. Akari had always said that a good hot pot was all about the quality of the ingredients. A new, grotesque idea began to take root in his mind, a macabre recipe for the perfect crime. It was a plan born of desperation and fueled by a chilling, newfound sense of creative inspiration. This would be his masterpiece, his ultimate, final work of art. With a grim sense of purpose, he set to work. He was no stranger to anatomy, his art studies having included countless hours sketching the human form. He approached the task with the same detached precision he would have given to one of his paintings. He laid her body on a plastic tarp he retrieved from the garage, the one they used for picnics in the park during happier times. He chose his tools carefully, not from his art supplies, but from the set of professional-grade knives he had gifted Akari for their third wedding anniversary. Each blade, from the heavy-duty deba to the razor-sharp yanajiba, was a painful reminder of the life he had just extinguished. He worked through the night, the gruesome task illuminated by the cold, sterile light of the kitchen. The sounds of his work were a grotesque symphony of wet, tearing noises and the rhythmic thud of a cleaver against bone. He dismembered her body with a chilling efficiency. His hands, once used to create images of beauty, now engaged in an act of utter desecration. He separated flesh from bone, his knowledge of butchery, gleaned from watching Akari over the years, proving to be terrifyingly proficient. The larger, more identifiable parts of her body he wrapped in heavy-duty trash bags, sealing them with duct tape. These he would dispose of later, under the cover of darkness, in the dense, unforgiving woods of the Aokigahara forest, a place known for its dark and tragic history. It seemed a fitting final resting place for his secrets. The rest, the smaller, more manageable pieces of flesh, he meticulously prepared. He trimmed the fat, cut the meat into bite-sized cubes, and marinated it in a mixture of soy sauce, mirin, and sake. The same marinade Akari had taught him to use for his favorite beef sukiyaki. The act was a twisted parody of their shared culinary passion, a final, horrific perversion of the love they had once known. As dawn approached, he was a man transformed. His clothes were stained with the evidence of his night's work, his face a pale, emotionless mask. He cleaned the kitchen with a feverish intensity, scrubbing the floors, wiping down the counters, bleaching every surface until not a single trace of his horrific act remained. The scent of bleach mingled with the faint, sweet smell of the marinade, creating a nauseatingly domestic aroma. He took a shower, letting the hot water wash away the physical evidence of his crime, but it could do nothing to cleanse the stain from his soul. He dressed in clean clothes, a somber, dark suit, and began to rehearse his story. Kari had left him. She had finally taken the job in Tokyo, tired of his failures, of his drinking, of him. She had packed a bag in a rage and stormed out, her final words a string of venomous insults. It was a plausible story, a narrative that played into the whispers and rumors that had already begun to circulate among their friends and neighbors about their troubled marriage. Later that day, he received a phone call. It was Akari's mother, her voice laced with a cheerful, unsuspecting warmth. She was calling to invite them over for dinner that weekend. The whole family would be there, her sisters, their husbands, the children. They were planning a hotpot dinner, a celebration of the changing seasons. Kenji's blood ran cold. The phone felt like a block of ice in his hand. But then, the cogs of his twisted mind began to turn. This was an opportunity, a chance to not only dispose of the remaining evidence, but to also add a final macabre flourish to his masterpiece. It was a stroke of genius, a testament to his twisted creativity. "We would love to come," he said, his voice a carefully constructed mask of polite enthusiasm. In fact, Akari has been working on a new hotpot recipe. "A special kind of meat," she said. "A surprise. She was so excited to have you all try it. Why don't I bring the main ingredient? It would be my pleasure." There was a moment of hesitation on the other end of the line. Then Akari's mother, ever the gracious host, agreed. "That would be wonderful, Kenji-san. We all look forward to tasting Akari's latest creation." After he hung up the phone, a slow, chilling smile spread across Kenji's face. The stage was set. The final act of his gruesome play was about to begin. He looked at the neatly packaged portions of marinated meat in his refrigerator, the last terrible remnants of the woman he had once loved. He would serve his wife to her own family, a final, unspeakable act of defiance. They would praise her culinary genius, unaware that they were partaking in a cannibalistic feast, a feast orchestrated by the man who had murdered her. It was the perfect, twisted ending to his dark, tragic love story. He was no longer just a failed artist. He was a creator of a new, horrific art form, one that blended life, death, and cuisine into a single, unforgettable masterpiece of depravity. The mother-in-law's family was about to be served a meal they would never forget, for all the wrong reasons. The hot pot was about to become a vessel for a secret so dark, it would shatter their world forever. The day of the hot pot dinner arrived with a crisp, autumnal chill in the air. Kenji dressed with meticulous care, selecting a dark, somber suit that seemed more appropriate for a funeral than a family gathering. He packed the carefully prepared special meat into a high-end cooler bag, the kind Akari used for her catering events. To any casual observer, he was the picture of a thoughtful son-in-law, bringing a dish to share with his wife's family. The banality of the act was in stark, terrifying contrast to the horrific truth of what the cooler contained. He drove to his in-laws' house, the cooler bag sitting on the passenger seat beside him like a silent, macabre companion. He rehearsed his story one last time, polishing the edges, adding small, believable details. Akari had been so stressed lately, the pressure of the Tokyo offer weighing heavily on her. They had argued, terrible things had been said. She had left in the middle of the night, taking only a small suitcase with her. He had been trying to call her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. He had even feigned a tearful breakdown, a performance he had practiced in front of his bathroom mirror until it was convincingly pathetic. He was greeted at the door by Akari's mother, a woman with the same warm, gentle smile as her daughter. The sight of her sent a momentary, sharp pang of something akin to guilt through him, but he quickly suppressed it. He was an artist, and this was his grandest, most daring installation. There was no room for sentiment. "Kenji-san, welcome," she said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Where is Akari-chan? Is she parking the car?" Kenji's carefully rehearsed performance began. His face crumpled into a mask of sorrow. "She's not with me, Oka-san," he said, his voice thick with faux emotion. She left." The story tumbled out, a torrent of well-crafted lies and half-truths. He painted a picture of a marriage in its death throes, of a wife who had chosen her career over her husband. Akari's family, who had witnessed the growing distance between the couple, listened with a mixture of shock and sympathy. They had always known Kenji to be a quiet, somewhat moody man, but they had never suspected their daughter's marriage was in such dire straits. They comforted him, patting his back, offering him tea, their words of solace a bitter, ironic soundtrack to his deception. He played the part of the heartbroken husband to perfection, his performance so convincing that even he, for a fleeting moment, almost believed his own lies. The centerpiece of the dinner was a large, ornate earthenware pot, the nabe, which was already simmering with a fragrant kombu dashi on a portable burner in the center of the table. The other ingredients were laid out on platters, a vibrant mosaic of napa cabbage, shiitake mushrooms, enoki mushrooms, tofu, and shirataki noodles. All that was missing was the main ingredient, the special meat Kenji had brought. With a sense of grim ceremony, he opened the cooler bag and presented the platter of marinated meat. The family murmured their appreciation. The meat was a beautiful, deep red, a testament to the quality of the cut and the richness of the marinade. No one, of course, could have identified the true source of the venison he claimed it to be, a special cut he had procured from a hunter friend. The hotpot began in earnest. The family gathered around the table, their chopsticks dipping into the communal pot, a symbol of unity and togetherness. They added the meat, piece by piece, to the simmering broth. Kenji watched, his heart a cold, hard knot in his chest, as the family he had married into, the family of the woman he had murdered, began to eat her flesh. "This is delicious, Kenji-san," Akari's father said, after savoring a piece of the meat. "Akari has outdone herself. The texture is so tender, and the marinade is exquisite." Akari's younger sister agreed. "I've never tasted anything like it. She must give me the recipe." Each compliment was a fresh, sharp stab of a knife in Kenji's psyche. He ate a single piece of the meat himself, a final, horrific act of communion with his victim. The taste was rich, complex, and utterly sickening. He had to force himself to swallow, a wave of nausea threatening to overwhelm him. The meal continued, the conversation flowing around him, a surreal cacophony of small talk and laughter. They talked about Akari, reminiscing about her childhood, her culinary school days, her recent successes. They expressed their hope that she would soon come to her senses and return home. Kenji nodded and murmured his agreement. A wolf in sheep's clothing, a monster sitting amongst the innocent. The first thread of his carefully woven tapestry of lies began to unravel a few days later. Akari's younger sister, a tech-savvy university student, became suspicious. It wasn't like her sister to just disappear, to not answer her phone, to not even send a single text message. She knew her sister and Kenji had been having problems, but Akari was a fighter. She wouldn't have just run away without a word to her family. Using a Find My Phone app they had installed for emergencies, she tried to locate Akari's cell phone. To her surprise, the signal wasn't in Tokyo, or anywhere else for that matter. It was coming from Kenji and Akari's house. A cold sense of dread began to creep up her spine. She called the police. The initial investigation was low-key. 2 detectives arrived at Kenji's house, their questions polite but firm. Kenji, confident in his deception, welcomed them in. He retold his story of the fight, of Akari's angry departure. He even showed them the half-empty closet, the missing suitcase, all the props he had carefully arranged to support his narrative. But the detectives were thorough. They obtained a warrant to search the house. First, they found nothing. The house was immaculately clean, almost too clean. The kitchen, in particular, gleamed, the faint, lingering scent of bleach hanging in the air. It was in the garage that they found the first piece of incriminating evidence. Tucked away in a corner, behind a stack of old newspapers, was a small, dark stain on the concrete floor. A presumptive test for blood came back positive. The discovery of the bloodstain was the catalyst for a full-scale forensic investigation. The house was now a crime scene, every surface dusted for fingerprints, every drain pipe checked for evidence. The detectives brought Kenji in for further questioning. His calm, collected demeanor began to crack under the pressure of their relentless interrogation. Small inconsistencies in his story began to appear, tiny cracks in his carefully constructed alibi. The final, damning piece of evidence came from the most unlikely of sources, the leftovers from the Hotpot dinner. Akari's mother, ever frugal, had saved the remaining broth and a few pieces of the special meat. The detectives, now highly suspicious of Kenji's story, sent a sample of the meat to the forensic lab for analysis. The results of the DNA test were unequivocal and utterly horrifying. The meat was human, and it was a perfect match for Akari. Faced with the irrefutable scientific evidence, Kenji's carefully constructed world collapsed. The artist, the master of deception, finally confessed. In a cold, emotionless monotone, he recounted the events of that terrible night. The argument, the murder, the gruesome butchery, and the final unspeakable act of culinary depravity. The news of his confession sent a shockwave of horror through the community, and through the heart of Akari's devastated family. The realization that they had not only been in the presence of their daughter's murderer, but that they had also unknowingly partaken in a cannibalistic feast, was a truth so monstrous, it was almost impossible to comprehend. The hot pot, a symbol of family and togetherness, was now a symbol of an unimaginable horror. Kenji's trial was a media sensation, a macabre spectacle that captivated and horrified the nation. He was sentenced to life in prison, his final masterpiece not a painting to be hung in a gallery, but a story of horror to be whispered in hushed, disgusted tones for years to come. The failed artist had finally achieved a twisted kind of fame, his name forever linked to one of the most gruesome and bizarre crimes in the country's history. The Hotpot murder, as it came to be known, was a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind a placid, domestic facade, and of how love, when twisted by jealousy and resentment, can be perverted into an act of unimaginable cruelty. The simmering pot, once a vessel of nourishment and love, had become a cauldron of death, its fragrant steam a harbinger of a truth more terrible than any fiction. Case solved, but the scars left on the hearts of those who loved Akari would never truly heal.